Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to talk about the 4 most important steps you need to take if you want to learn French. And I'm also going to give you a lot of online resources that you can use that will help you if your goal is to learn French. And normally I do videos that are much more general about language learning for any language, but I've decided I'm going to start doing a few videos that are more specifically focused on how to learn French. This video is kind of inspired by a blog article that I just wrote a few weeks ago called "Is French Hard to Learn?" And of course, the answer to that question is it depends, because there are just certain strategies for learning that are going to make your life a whole lot more difficult than if you use more efficient methods for learning French. So the good news is learning French can actually be quite a bit easier than you might have previously expected. And the first thing I'm going to recommend is focus on vocabulary first. And what I mean by that is, especially early on when you're a new beginner, learning words is a whole lot more important than learning grammar rules. And the reason for that is pretty simple. If you know all of the grammar in the language, but no words, you're not going to be able to say anything. But if you don't quite have all the grammar rules figured out, but you know lots of words, you're still going to be able to communicate your point across. And the ability to speak with a more limited grammar is going to help you keep improving and progressing into the future. Now, there's a few things that you can do in order to help you focus on learning vocabulary first. One that you might already be familiar with is using SRS systems, or basically online flashcards like Memrise or Anki. Now, I don't actually recommend using the official course created by Memrise for learning French. There are some user-created courses, if you scroll a little further down, that I find to be much more useful. Like, for example, 450 most common French words. And another really nice feature of Memrise and Anki is that you can create your own course, which means you're going to be able to customize these apps to learn words that are more specific to you. And what you'll do is go to websites like wordreference.com or lingui.com, which can give you a lot of really good example sentences. And you're going to look for words that are relevant to your job, your hobbies, your interests, anything that's specific to you that they might not teach in a more general course. Now, I want to be very clear that Memrise or Anki by themselves will not be enough to help you learn the language, because they teach you more or less isolated vocabulary words. And what you really want to be able to do is learn those words in context. So apps like LingQ are going to be really valuable to help you do that. And if you don't know what LingQ is, that's LingQ. And it's basically an app that will help you learn to read in your target language. And the way you do that is by reading through short, simple stories that are not too complex and they're not going to confuse you. And every time you run into a word that you don't know, you're just going to click on it and it will change color. And then it'll also give you a definition over here. And then LingQ will also remember which words you're learning, and it'll help you review them later on. And it's just a really useful app. Now, LingQ has a free version, which isn't very good, but you can try it out. And there's also a paid version, which I find to be really, really useful. If you are interested in subscribing to LingQ, you can use this URL up here, or link.com/en/finctumlanguages, and you'll receive a 35% discount. And then I'll also get a small commission to come back and support my channel based off of your purchase. And that leads me to my next step that I recommend for learning French, which is comprehensible and compelling input. When I say input, I'm referring to listening practice and reading practice, as opposed to speaking and writing. Most of the science that we have now in regards to how humans learn new languages supports the idea that input is really, really important. And a part of the reason for that is that we can get so much exposure to the language through listening and reading. It's just so much easier to find practice time for using those methods than for finding time to speak to someone throughout the day. And again, LingQ is going to be a really useful resource for that, because it combines both reading practice and listening through the audio component. Music is also one of my favorite methods for learning any language. So go ahead and create yourself a playlist of just songs in that language and listen to it on repeat as you're driving or working out or anytime throughout the day. And you're going to start to get a lot of good input in French. I also recommend my books Une Petite Copine Zombie and Le Petit Dragon. These books are nice because they are specifically designed for absolute beginners. There's lots of pictures and a glossary of words that you might not know, and it just makes reading a whole lot easier than if you were starting off with a children's book designed for native speakers. You can get both of those as a Kindle book or a paperback on Amazon, so I'll leave the link to that in the description below. I also recommend anything written in French by Olly Richards. This book is short stories in French, and I found it to be really useful. The book says it's for beginners, but I actually find it's more appropriate for intermediate levels. So if you're just starting off, then you might not be able to read everything in this story quite yet, but eventually it will become very useful. There's also a great YouTube series called Extra French, and this is a sitcom kind of in the style of How I Met Your Mother or Friends. And it's pretty funny, it's entertaining, but it's also designed for people who are learning French, so it won't be too difficult to follow along. The next thing you need to make sure you do in French is conversation practice. I know this is terrifying for a lot of us, but at some point, you just have to start speaking French. A great app for this is HelloTalk, which is going to connect you to a lot of native speakers from around the world who are also trying to learn your native language. And what you do is just send them a message or leave a comment on their post, and you say, hey, I'm trying to learn French and I can help you learn my native language. I find this app to be really useful for finding people to have text conversations with. I often do voice recording conversations in our text messages, and for finding people who are just willing to do a video call conversation with me. Now, if you have the money and you don't want to take the time to speak your native language to someone, iTalki is also a pretty useful site. And you can go on here and find tutors who are just willing to speak to you in French for half an hour or an hour or however long you want. And then the last thing I recommend doing if you want to learn French is put the grammar book down. Now, I know this is counterintuitive because many of us grew up learning French in school, and the textbook was a vital part of that process. And textbooks can be okay. They can give you a little bit of useful head knowledge, but they are not as useful as comprehensible input and conversation practice. A lot of us fall into the trap of wanting to understand all of the grammar rules so that we can make sure we speak perfectly right away. Let me give you a hint. You're not gonna speak perfectly right away. You cannot memorize all of the grammar rules before you start using the language. So if you're preparing for a French exam on grammar rules, then yes, a textbook will be helpful. But if your goal is just to learn to speak French, then comprehensible input and conversation practice are the only way that you will make progress in that area. If you want to learn more about what you should be doing to learn French, be sure to click this video here for a more complete idea and more ideas about how we learn languages effectively. So be sure to give that video a watch and then go into the world and learn French.